Hello friends, welcome to my video channel. So today we will start a video channel which is very informative and associated with competitive exams for the aspirants who are willing to work in the government section. So the name of this examination is UPSC, that is Union Public Service Commission. The exam is held by Government of India and it is run throughout the India for the posts of government. But what is the history for the UPSC and how it became evidence based in India? So the historical perspective is that civil servants for the East India Company used to be nominated by the directors of company and thereafter trained at Helbury College in London and then sent to India. Following the Lord Macaulay's report of the Select Committee of British Parliament, the concept of a merit-based modern civil service in India was introduced in 1854. The report recommended that patronage-based system of East India Company should be replaced by the permanent civil service based on the merit system and entry through the competitive examinations. For this purpose, a civil service commission was set up in 1854 in London and competitive examinations were started in 1855. Initially, the examinations for Indian civil services were conducted only in London. Maximum age was 23 years and the minimum age was 18 years. So the syllabus was designed such that European classics had a predominant share of the marks. All this made it difficult for Indian candidates. Nevertheless, in 1864, the first Indian, Sri Satyendranath Tagore, brother of Sri Rabindranath Tagore, succeeded in the examination. 3 years later, 4 other Indians succeeded throughout the next 50 years. Indians petitioned for simultaneous examination to be held in India without success because the British government did not want many Indians to succeed and enter the ICS. So it was only after the First World War and the Montagu Chelmsford reforms that this was agreed to form. Then from 1922 onwards, the Indian civil service examination began to held in India also. Then first in Allahabad and later in Delhi. With the setting up of the Federal Public Service Commission, the examination in London continued to be conducted by the Civil Service Commissions. Similarly, prior to the independence, superior police officers belonged to the Indian, that is Imperial Police, appointed by the Secretary of State by competitive examination. The first open competition for the service was held in England in June 1893 and 10 top candidates were appointed as a probationary assistant superintendent of the police. Entry into Imperial Police was thrown open to Indians only after 1920, and the following year examinations for the service were conducted both in England and India. Indianizations of the police service continued to be very slow despite the pronouncement and recommendations of the Islington Commission and the Lee Commission. Till 1931, Indians were appointed against 20% of the total post superintendents of police. However, because of non-availability of the suitable European candidates, more Indians were appointed to the Indian police from the year 1939 onwards. Regarding forest service, British India government stated that the Imperial Forest Department in 1864 and to organize the affairs of Imperial Forest Department, Imperial Forest Services and Forest Service were trained in the France and Germany. Till 1905, they were trained at Cooper Hill, London. In 1920, it was decided that the further recruitment to the Imperial Forest Service would be made by direct recruitment in England and India by promotion from the provincial service in India. After independence, the Indian Forest Services was created in 1966 under All India Services Act 1951. So regarding central services, civil services, the civil services in British India were classified as the covenanted and uncovenanted services on the basis of the nature of work, pay scales and appointing authority. In 1887, the Aitchison Commission recommended the reorganization of the services on a new pattern and divided the services into 3 groups, that is imperial, provincial and subordinate. The recruiting and controlling authority of Imperial Services was the Secretary of State. Initially, mostly British candidates were recruited for these services. The appointing and controlling authority for the provincial services was respective of provincial government, which framed the rules of these services with the approval of the Government of India. With the passing of Indian Act 1999, the imperial services headed by the Secretary of State of India were split into two: All India services and central services. The central services were concerned with the matters under the direct control of central government. Apart from the central secretariat, the more important of these services were the railway services, the Indian Post and the Telegraph Service, and the Imperial Customs Services also. To some of these, the Secretary of the State used to make appointments, but in the great majority of the cases, their members were appointed and controlled by the Government of India. The origin of Public Service Commission in India is found in the first dispatch of the Government of India on the Indian constitutional reforms on the 5th March 1919, which refer to the need of setting up some permanent office charged with the regulation of service matters. This concept of a body intended to be charged primarily with the regulation of service matters found somewhat more practical shape in the Government of India Act 1919. Section 96C of the Act provided for the establishment in India of a Public Service Commission which should discharge in regards to the recruitment and control of public services in India. Such a functions as may be assigned thereto by rules made by the Secretary of State in Council. After passing the Government of India Act 1919, in spite of the prolonged correspondence among various levels on the functions of machinery of the body to be set up, no decision was taken on setting up the body. The subject was referred to the Royal Commission on Superior Civil Services in India, also known as Lee Commission. The Lee Commission, in their report in the year 1924, recommended that the Statutory Public Service Commission contemplated by the Government of India Act 1919 should be established without delay. So, subsequent to the provisions of Section 96C, the Government of India Act 1990 and the strong recommendations made by the Lee Commission in 1924 for the early establishment of the Public Service Commission, it was on October 1st, 1926 that the Public Service Commission was set up in India for the first time. It consisted of 4 members in addition to the chairman, Sir Ross Barker, a member of the Home Civil Service of the United Kingdom, was the first chairman of the commission. The functions of the Public Service Commission were not laid down in the Government of India Act 1919, but were regulated by the Public Service Commission, that is Functions Rules 1926, framed under the subsection 2 of the Section 96C of the Government of India Act 1919. Further, the Government of India Act 1935 envisaged a Public Service Commission for the Federation and the Provincial Public Service Commission for each province or group of provinces. Therefore, in terms of the provisions of Government of India Act 1935, with its coming into effect on 1st April 1937, the Public Service Commission became the Federal Public Service Commission. With the inauguration of Constitution of India in January 26, 1950, the Federal Public Service Commission came to be known as the Union Public Service Commission, that is UPSC, and the chairman and the members of the Federal Public Service Commission became chairman and the members of the Union Public Service Commission by virtue of Clause 1 of Article 378 of the Constitution. Furthermore, so it was January 26, 1950, after which inauguration of UPSC happened after the introduction of Constitution in India, and thereafter the UPSC examination started to be covered for the Indian users. So guys, I hope you liked this video. For more updates about UPSC and how we are going to classify it into the substructure further, keep watching my video channel and do subscribe and like. Thank you guys.